The moment my best friend sat on my lap in the middle of a crowded bar, I thought it was nothing more than a ridiculous solution to a ridiculous problem. Every table was occupied, people were standing shoulder to shoulder, and the only empty place anywhere in the room was my chair, because I was already sitting in it. She laughed, looked at me as if she had just made the most obvious decision in the world, and lowered herself onto my lap. I laughed too. Everyone around us laughed. But then an empty seat finally opened across the room, and she never moved. That was the moment I realized something between us had changed long before either of us had the courage to admit it. Before we continue, if you enjoy emotional stories about friendship, second chances, unexpected love, and the moments that quietly change our lives, please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear this story, leave a comment, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness for more stories about second chances. Her name was Emma, and she had been my best friend for almost 12 years. We had met during college when neither of us knew what we wanted from life. I was the quiet one who preferred listening to talking, while Emma could walk into a room full of strangers and somehow leave with 10 new friends. She had a way of making ordinary days feel important. We studied together, celebrated birthdays together, survived terrible relationships together, and showed up for each other when everyone else disappeared. Somewhere along the way, she became the person I trusted most in the world. There was only one problem. I had fallen in love with her years ago, and I had never told her. I convinced myself that silence was safer. Emma had dated other people, and I had watched every relationship begin with excitement and end with tears. Whenever she was heartbroken, I was the one who brought food to her apartment and stayed until she fell asleep. Whenever I had a bad day, she was the person who knew without asking. We had built something beautiful, but I was terrified that telling her the truth would destroy it. So I buried my feelings beneath jokes, late-night conversations, and the comfortable lie that we were simply best friends. That Friday night, Emma called me unexpectedly and insisted that we go out. She had been having a difficult week, although she refused to explain why. We met at an old neighborhood bar where we had celebrated countless milestones over the years. The place was packed that night. Music vibrated through the walls, glasses clinked everywhere, and people crowded around every available table. We somehow found 2 chairs at the end of the bar, but within minutes, Emma disappeared to get drinks. When she returned, someone had taken the second chair. She looked around, shrugged, and then looked directly at me with that familiar mischievous smile. Before I could react, she sat on my lap. I froze. She laughed as though my expression was the funniest thing she had ever seen. I tried to joke about how heavy she was, but the truth was that I could barely breathe. I could smell her perfume, feel her warmth, and hear her laughter against the noise of the room. For a few seconds, the entire bar seemed to disappear. Then someone at the next table pointed toward an empty seat that had just become available. I expected Emma to get up immediately. She didn't. I glanced toward the chair, then back at her. She simply rested her head against my shoulder and said she was comfortable. That simple moment stayed with me. For the next hour, she remained there. We talked about everything and nothing. She told me about her childhood dreams, the things she regretted, and how tired she was of pretending that everything was fine. I listened, just as I always had. But something felt different. Her hand occasionally touched mine, and neither of us pulled away. Then she quietly admitted that she had been seeing someone. My heart dropped. She told me his name and explained that he had made her feel wanted, but not understood. She said she had spent years confusing attention with love. She had finally realized that the person who made her feel safest had been beside her all along. I didn't dare assume she meant me. Instead, I asked her what she planned to do. She became quiet. Then she told me she was afraid of losing her best friend. Those words hurt more than I expected. I told her that some friendships were worth protecting, even when life became complicated. She looked into my eyes for a long moment, and I knew she could see something I had spent years hiding. She asked me why I had never dated seriously. I laughed nervously and told her I had never met the right person. She didn't laugh. She asked whether I had already met her. I looked away. That was when everything we had avoided for 12 years finally became impossible to ignore. I told her the truth. I told her that I had loved her quietly for years. That every time she came to me crying over another man, I wanted to tell her that she deserved someone who would never make her question her worth. That every time she hugged me goodbye, I wanted to hold her longer. And that I had remained silent because losing her completely terrified me more than living without the possibility of having her. Emma didn't say anything. She simply placed her hand against my cheek. For the first time in years, I saw tears in her eyes. She admitted that she had wondered about us too, but she had been afraid. She had assumed I didn't see her that way. She thought our friendship was too precious to risk. We sat there in silence while the bar continued moving around us. Eventually, she got off my lap. For one terrible second, I thought I had ruined everything. She walked toward the empty chair. Then she stopped. She turned around and came back. This time, she didn't sit on my lap because there was nowhere else to sit. She sat beside me because she wanted to. That difference meant everything. The next few weeks weren't magically perfect. We were awkward. We questioned every decision. We worried about whether we were destroying 12 years of friendship by trying something new. There were uncomfortable conversations and moments when one of us wanted to retreat into the safety of the past. But we kept choosing honesty. Emma ended the relationship that had been making her unhappy. I stopped pretending that my feelings didn't exist. Slowly, we learned how to see each other not just as best friends, but as two people who had spent years growing together without realizing where that journey was leading. Months later, we returned to that same bar. This time, there were plenty of empty seats. Emma looked around, smiled, and deliberately sat beside me. She took my hand beneath the table. I asked her if she remembered that night. She smiled and said she remembered everything. Then she told me something I would never forget: sometimes the person we spend our whole lives looking for isn't someone we need to find. Sometimes they're already sitting beside us, waiting for us to become brave enough to see them. Years later, when I think about that crowded bar, I no longer remember the music or the drinks or the people watching us. I remember the empty chair. I remember that she could have moved. But she didn't. And sometimes, love begins not with a grand confession, but with one small decision to stay. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes that friendship can become something beautiful, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness for more stories about love, hope, and second chances. Before you go, comment, "Sometimes love is already beside us," if this story reminded you of someone special in your life. Because the greatest love stories aren't always the ones that begin with strangers meeting for the first time. Sometimes they begin with two people who have already spent years knowing each other, and one day finally find the courage to see what was there all along.